Hello everyone and welcome to this regional review for the Southwest. Today we'll take a look at the last 13 weeks of 2020 and how they performed under the ever-changing COVID rules and restrictions. We'll then look at 2021 to see how things are performing to date. Before that, I'll hand over to Diane for a brief overview of Springboard, then I'll cover how we deal with year-on-year comparisons before going into the data. Finally, we'll touch on some of the predictions for 2021.
Hello everyone, I'm Diane Worrell, Springboard's Marketing and Insights Director. For anyone who isn't familiar with Springboard, I thought it would be helpful to give a quick tour of what we do. We deliver data and insights on customers in destinations and also in bricks and mortar stores. Our key metric is footfall, that's the volume of customer activity, and we track footfall across the UK. We have a network of counters tracking footfall continuously 24 hours a day at around 4,500 locations, and we cover around 250 towns and cities. This map shows our coverage in high streets, and you can see that we track footfall across all regions of the UK. Our coverage includes all of our regional cities, but also a huge range of towns of different sizes and functions, from large town centres to small local high streets. In fact, we've adopted what we call a hub and spoke approach to our coverage, ensuring that every regional city is included, as these are the hubs of economic activity within each region, but then also smaller towns in the region. This means that in any one region, we're tracking footfall in towns that account for around 2/3 of all spend. And nationally, this has ensured that the correlation between our coverage and spend nationally is very high. In fact, around 93%. So our data accurately represents the retail landscape across the UK. The relevance of our footfall data is demonstrated by the fact that we're a partner of the High Street Task Force, delivering footfall data so the task force can understand high street performance. And we also provide data to both BEIS, the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and the ONS, the Office of National Statistics. And in fact, our data features in the ONS's weekly Faster Indicators report that tracks the impact of COVID-19 on economic activity.
Thank you, Diane, for the overview. As always, before we hit the data, we're going to briefly talk calendars. Previously, I've talked about the structure of the reporting calendar we use and how we make comparisons, and last month I covered the delights of 2020 being a 53-week year. Today I'd like to cover how we will make our month-on-month comparisons for January. But what's special about January comparisons this year? Well, January 2020 had an extra week added, the intercalary week, which I talked about in a previous webinar, making 2020 up to a 53-week year. This means that January this year in 2021 has 1 week less. Because 2021 is a standard 52-week year, January is made up of 4 weeks rather than the 5 in 2020. So why is this important? Going back to the maths of comparisons, you may remember that to use the comparison calculation we've talked about before, the length of time of the current and previous periods must be the same. So how do we do this for January, given that 2020 had 5 weeks and 2021 only 4? Let's look at the calendar layout to understand this more clearly. So here we can see how all the various weeks line up when comparing 2021 to 2020. Note that the weeks have been lined up based on the closest week commencing dates. This then clearly shows that the 4 weeks of January 2021 line up really nicely with weeks 2 to 5 of January 2020. The following months all fall into place following January for their year-on-year comparisons. Notice how week 1 of 2020 is left out of these comparisons. It is in fact slightly greyed out on here, and this is because it's been used for comparisons already. If you recall from last month, we had to add week 1 2020 to the end of 2019 when calculating the year-on-year comparisons for December, so we haven't completely left it out in the cold. And there we go. When calculating year-on-year change for the month of January, the total of weeks 1 to 4 2021 is compared directly to the totals of weeks 2 to 5 2020. Now we'll look at the data for the Southwest for quarter 4 2020. Let's start with some context. Looking across all destination types across the UK, we can see that all destinations, unsurprisingly, saw a huge drop in footfall across the course of 2020. As has been covered in other reviews, retail parks have proven the most resilient during this period, primarily because so many of these locations include supermarkets and other FMCG outlets, which were at points in the year the only stores open for trade, while also the size of many retail parks enables social distancing to be much more easily achieved. High streets have seen the biggest hit to footfall, hospitality, non-essential retail and office space making up much of the draw here, and so many of these were affected heavily by the various restrictions imposed over the year. However, on the positive side for many local high streets, there has been a growth in localism outside of the large regional cities. For more on this, please do check out our 2020 annual review if you haven't already. As identified in our annual review, there are 6 key time periods across 2020 in relation to footfall defined by the COVID response. Pre-COVID, up to week 11, the first lockdown from weeks 12 to 24, the reopening of retail in weeks 25 through to week 44, our second lockdown, which was weeks 45 to 48, the reopening again, week 49 to 50, and then finally the move to tier 4s and lockdown 3, which was from weeks 51 to 53. Quarter 4, starting in week 41, covers 4 of these periods: the retail reopening, lockdown 2, reopening in December, and then tier 4s and lockdown 3. So all in all, quite an eventful quarter. Comparing the year-on-year performance of high streets against the UK as a whole, the impact can be seen. High streets have not fared as well throughout the pandemic as other destination types. They have followed the same pattern, which indicates that the restrictions being imposed are having similar effects across all destination types, but are hitting high streets the hardest. However, not everything is bad news for the high streets. As I alluded to earlier, local high streets have proven to be far more resilient than the larger regional cities. As less people travel into these cities and work from home, more people are rediscovering their local high streets. The fact that these are often accessible and within walking distance of home, combined with being open air and lacking the congestion of larger locations, makes them more attractive. And with the rise in home working, more people are within the daytime catchment of these local high streets more often, potentially a trend we will see going forwards. Now if we look at the high streets in the southwest against high streets across the UK, we can see that although the general pattern is similar, there are some differences in performance. High streets in the southwest generally outperformed the UK throughout the whole of quarter 4, with the exception of lockdown. It's apparent from this chart that the southwest was clearly less affected than the rest of the UK, probably as a result of people being allowed to travel and visit, with staycations becoming more popular by default as international travel was not on the cards. This would explain the bigger drop over lockdown 2. Suddenly those staycationers were no longer able to visit. It's interesting that there's a week's lag in the impact of the lockdown, both in the drop in footfall at the start and the increase in footfall at the end. We can break this down a little further by examining the changes in footfall across day parts in the region. Here we're looking at the change in daytime, early evening and nighttime footfall compared to last year to see if we can place where high streets in the southwest were most affected. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the nighttime has seen the largest and longest fall in footfall, but during lockdown 2 there was a significant drop in daytime footfall, with day visitors discouraged from visiting, though this picked back up again almost as soon as the lockdown ended, though not to its earlier level, so a clear impact of the various tier restrictions which made movement more difficult. Now let's look at the data for the southwest for 2021 up to week 20. Looking at the data for 2021, we need to compare to 2019. Given the massive changes in data during the various lockdowns in 2020, a year-on-year comparison gives some wildly fluctuating changes as non-lockdowns are compared to lockdown periods. It's far better for us to compare to a normal year, and so we can now see how 2021 is tracking against 2019, and so how far away we are from normal. Unsurprisingly, the beginning of the year was a bit of a washout. Up until the reopening of non-essential retail, footfall was massively down on 2019. During this period, the southwest was tracking along with the rest of the UK. As soon as retail reopened though, we can see that high streets in the southwest saw a greater improvement than the UK as a whole. The initial jump was somewhat watered down over the following weeks, in some cases literally, as the turn in weather brought cold, rainy weather across the UK. Even so, things are looking good for the southwest comparatively, and as weather starts to improve and holiday season comes along, we expect to see the southwest continue to outperform the UK. Lastly today, I wanted to touch on some of the results from our 2020 annual review that are going to be particularly important for high streets, along with some findings from other research Springboard have carried out. We will likely see a marked change once the vaccination levels in the UK reach a critical mass, At this point, we'd expect to see a definite change in behaviour from the general population as the freedom to go back somewhat more to our previous lives is presented. Of course, with the recent reopening of hospitality, there will be much eagerness to go to the pub for a drink with friends we haven't seen for months. As we reported in the media, we had predicted an increase of 47.9% week on week across retail destinations when retail reopened on April the 12th. In fact, we saw a week on week increase of 93.2% in the UK high streets compared to 87.8% across all UK destinations. While this is great news, it is slightly tempered by the fact that compared to our normal year of 2019, we're still nearly 35% down. With home working proving viable, we're expecting it to remain a part of people's working lives, whether 100% home-based or a hybrid model of some home and some office work. This will help the local high streets retain the business they've established in this time as local loyalty continues. This change in working locations may result in a change in local high streets footfall peaks, both in the days of the week and the times of the day. The greater use of online shopping means that this will likely rebase at a higher level, while footfall will rebase at a lower level. For high streets in smaller towns, there may be repercussions if unemployment rises, as this will likely put a brake on spending should it arise. Thank you for your time today. I hope you found some useful information in this webinar. Until next time.